So now you're starting to feel a little more comfortable, right? You've learned Flexbox, you've realized, oh my gosh, that solves countless problems that I had in the past. But now, as you're starting to become a little cocky, imagine you have a site here, you reduce the width and you realize everything blows up and it looks horrible here. So this is where responsive design comes into play. Let's talk about it. I'm going to set up a very quick grid here. So this will be a class of Flex, and within it we'll have a handful of items. Let's do a 4-column grid. So I will set a width of 1/4, a little padding all around, and then within here a box where we can number it. And here maybe we can set a background color of gray and a little extra padding as well. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, stimulating, right? 7, and 8. All right, so let me update these numbers behind the scenes. There we go. So now if I switch back to Chrome and we give this a refresh, here's what we get. So you'll notice that because we set a display of Flex up here, the browser is trying to fit as many of these items in a row as it possibly can. And you'll notice that we did set a width of 1/4, but that's kind of like telling it, in a best case scenario, I would like the width to be 25%. However, we got to get this all in a row, so we're going to take it as a suggestion, but if we need to shrink it in order to fit all of these items, then that's what we're going to do. All right, this is where Flex Wrap comes into play. And you'll notice this corresponds to Flex Wrap Wrap. This means, all right, well, if each of these elements has their own width, and we need to break to a new line, essentially, in order to maintain that width, do we have permission to do so? Here, we're saying yes, you can wrap onto a new line if you need to. So now, let's apply that. And here's what we get. A 4-column grid that extends for the entire browser. So that means as I reduce this, so does the width of each item. And that's because we're using percentages. So now if we come down to a mobile width, it doesn't look horrible here because we only have numbers, but in real life, you're going to have cards and images and text. It's very possible that a 4-column grid for mobile is going to look really, really bad. So this is where you find yourself in situations where you realize for a mobile device, we need it to display in this more simple way, but maybe if we get to a tablet or to a desktop size, we can fill up the page a bit more. Okay, so Tailwind does have some responsive helpers out of the box, but first I'm going to show you how to do some of these on your own. So let's imagine you didn't have Tailwind. Give it a refresh. Okay. Well, you could make some on your own. For example, let's say, well, a width of 1/4 should have a width of 25%. But now you'll notice we do have some special characters here that do need to be escaped. So I'll do that now. I'll also set a background color. Of course, this doesn't go with a class like that, but it helps us visualize it. Okay, so now each of these items has a width of 25%. Next, since we no longer have a Flex class, let's set that. All right, now they display as a row. And then finally, we'll add that Flex Wrap class. All right, and there we go. So we have our first helper class here. But now, what if we want to say, well, it'd be useful to have a 25% width, but only for desktop level devices. So this is where you have to think of the prefix you want to use. Now, something like Tailwind will use small, medium, and large. It might have an extra large, I can't quite remember. You can check your Tailwind configuration for that. But other test frameworks will use something more traditional like mobile, tablet, desktop, widescreen. It doesn't really matter, just pick a convention. So if we want to say, on desktop alone, we need a helper. All right, well, let's try large, width of 1/4. And again, I do need to escape that. Now, at the moment, this would be applied anywhere. So if we were to grab even this first one here, give it a refresh, it's still set to a width of 1/4. And that's because it's being applied everywhere. That specifies whether or not it should be applied. Let's wrap that in such a condition. We could say media, and if the minimum width is, I'm going to go low here just to make it easy, 576. That's more of like a medium breakpoint, but nonetheless, you get the idea. So if the browser width is at least 576 pixels, on that condition, I would like this following class to be available. All right, let's come back and give it a refresh. And now it's going to appear the way all of the other ones do. But as I reduce this, you'll see it disappears. So does that make sense? Take a look at this. In the top right-hand corner, you can see the current width of the window. So as we reach 576, 1 will now be applied. And if we reduce it, it's removed. That's the gist of a responsive helper. So now that you understand the basics, let's get rid of all of this, because something like Tailwind offers that out of the box. So let's bring it back to what we had before, give it a refresh. And now we have a 4-column grid here, but maybe for mobile devices, we just want 1 column there. We want it to take up all of the space. Okay, no problem. So let's select all of the columns here, and now I'm going to add the large prefix. Now we're saying for large devices, I would like to apply a width of 1/4. So if we give this a refresh, well, now what's going on there? We'll talk about it in a minute. But as I expand it, there it is. We hit a large breakpoint, and now we have a 4-column grid. But what about way down here? Well, think about it. On the condition that we don't have any width applied, and if we take a look at this for each one, you'll see, yep, there's no width being applied, so it's defaulting to that original behavior of flex and flex wrap. It's trying to fit as many items as it possibly can. It sounds like we want to display a flex only for large devices at the moment. So let's update these like so. All right, now if I give it a refresh, there we go. Each of these items takes up the full width, but as we expand it and we hit a new breakpoint, there we go. All right, but you'll notice right around this point, well, that's too much. So it sounds like we need to say, well, maybe for medium level devices, well, maybe we don't want 4 columns, maybe we want 2 columns. Okay, well, once again, we can say for medium, let's set a width of 1/2. For large, we want a width of 1/4. All right, so now we'll update these to take effect at the medium breakpoint level. So let's come back. On desktop, we have 4 columns. As we reduce to a tablet level, we have 2 columns. And now when we get to a mobile level, we have single columns. So an important thing to understand with Tailwind is it's mobile first. And what I mean by that is any class you apply will take effect for mobile all the way up to a widescreen level. For example, let's set a text of red for this first item here. Okay, what if you only want that color to be red for a large device? All right, you can say large red. And as I expand it, now it takes effect once we hit that breakpoint. However, once again, if we didn't have that breakpoint, it applies everywhere. Mobile first. It starts at the mobile level and it works its way all the way up. So that means for your breakpoints, think in terms of the minimum width rather than the maximum width. And this can be a little confusing if you've been around CSS for a while, because you might think of something like this as saying, okay, well, for medium devices all the way down to mobile, we want a width of 1/2. But that's actually not what it's saying. This is saying the opposite. Let me show you. Let's update this, get rid of that red text. All right, come back, give this a refresh. So as we expand, our medium breakpoint took effect, and let's expand it. Now ignore these other ones because they do have large breakpoints. But as we expand it, you'll notice nothing changes here, and that's because the minimum width is being applied here. So if you do want it to change for a larger breakpoint, then you have to be explicit. So let's now imagine, let's select all of these, get rid of the widths, we'll just have some padding. All right, there we go. And then I'll get rid of the prefix here. Okay, so now these classes should apply globally, whether it's a desktop or a mobile device. In many situations, you can get away with saying, okay, well, at the medium level, we want to use a display of flex, but for anything below that, then we don't want it to apply. And we've already talked about this. So yes, at a medium level, we want a flex direction of row. So if we give this a refresh, now it's just defaulting to a standard block level element. But once we hit that breakpoint, all right, well now we're going to start flexing these items. And if you want each of these to expand to take up all of the space, don't forget, let's select all of this. You could say flex 1. So remember there we're saying, okay, for each of these elements, you're allowed to flex to take up as much space as you possibly can. And if we have situations like, I don't think there's a flex 2 with Tailwind. Let's see. No. Let's imagine there was, though. We'll add one ourselves. Give it a refresh. Okay. Flex 2 says, okay, this item here should take up twice as much space as all of the other items. And all the other items have a flex of 1. So this one should take up twice as much space. If this were 4 or 8, it doesn't matter. What you set there, just think in terms of percentages and ratios. So now this will take up 8 times as much space as all of these other items here. And yeah, that's it. That's the basics of responsive design. You're going to do this over and over throughout your site. And this is where the concept of mobile-first development comes into play. And it's not easy, I'll warn you. The basic advice is you design in terms of the mobile layout, and then you build from there. And that kind of goes against your instinct, right? Your instinct is make it look good on desktop, and then once you're done, you can look at mobile and figure out, okay, what do I need to hide? Sometimes that's the easy way out. I do it myself too, honestly. What do I need to hide in order to make this look good? Now, with mobile-first development, the idea is do it the opposite. Think mobile first, and it's actually good advice because these days, the bulk of your traffic is probably coming from mobile, depending upon what you're building. So think mobile first, and then build from there. And this is where Tailwind's prefixes and responsive helpers can be very useful. But nonetheless, I would never beat you up over that because it's hard for me to do as well. You can say, yeah, start with mobile, but the reality is often if you're working with a designer, they're giving you a desktop layout, and that's what you're starting with. And then often from there, you build the mobile layout. So you don't always have the luxury of a finished mobile design when you start building. But nonetheless, try to think of these things. So for example, let's go to number 4 here. And let's set a margin right of 6. So if I come back and give this a refresh, you can see we've added some margin here. Now, often you'll do this because in the desktop layout, that's exactly what you need. But then when you come down to the mobile layout, you have this odd space to the right. These are all things you should be thinking about. So even if you're not doing mobile-first development, as you develop the different sections of your site, you're working on a card here, you're working on a pricing grid there, take some time, if it's looking good to you, bring it down, or, by the way, you can press Shift-Command-C on the Mac, and you can hit this little responsive helper here. Okay, now I can say, okay, for an iPhone 6, 7, 8, and plus, this is how it's going to look. And then you can adjust this however you need to. And just make sure, is this what I want? And in this situation, you might see, oh, I needed that margin right, but only when I had multiple columns here. So I need to go back and say, okay, for a medium or a large breakpoint, do I want that applied? So give it a refresh. And now that's all looking good. But if we come back, we do see the margin right here, which looks absurd, but you get the basic idea. Okay, so we're going to talk about this more in future lessons. But at least for now, try to wrap your brain around this, try to get comfortable with these responsive helpers, and always thinking, when you set something significant like a width of 1/4, be thinking, do I want a width of 1/4 for my desktop, or would a 25% width on a small mobile device be good? And if the answer is, no, I just want it to take up the full width for mobile, those are the situations. Make sure you add a prefix so that you only apply a width of 25% at your desired breakpoint.